Hey, what's going on, champs? I'm Aaron Deliosa. Welcome to an Immigrant's Life podcast, my podcast about immigrants and immigration and everything in between. Thank you for listening and downloading the show, and thank you for supporting my dad.
And here we are again, another month, another week, and another amazing episode with an immortal immigrant. Of course, every week, I want to thank you, Immigrant Nation, for your continued support. I also want to thank some of you that have been sending me beautiful and encouraging messages through our social media account. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. For the ones who are wondering how to get in touch with us, maybe you just want to say hi, or maybe you want to come on as a guest on the podcast, you can hit us up on all the social media at An Immigrant's Life, or you can email us at animmigrant'slife@yahoo.com. I'll be waiting for your messages. Before we get to the episode, I'd like to send my greetings to my home country, the Philippines. This Sunday, the 12th of June, is Philippines Independence Day. So I just want to give a shout out to my home country. I hope you enjoyed the celebration. I hope it's peaceful. Anyways, I'm dedicating this episode to my home country, the Philippines. And because of that, I invited a guest that is Filipina and very proud to be a Filipina. And I'm sure you're going to love her as much as I loved recording with her. I've talked enough. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is a lawyer, a fashionista, and a fellow podcaster. She's as majestic as the waling-waling flower and as brave as the Philippine eagle. Everyone, please welcome Christine Abrigana.
Hi, everyone. Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. Maayong hapon.
Mayong hapon, mayong adlaw.
Oh, is maayong adlaw or... Because I wasn't sure because you're like in the middle, you know?
Technically you're right, mayong hapon, but nobody actually says that among Bisaya speakers.
Really?
So we go for mayong adlaw for just like generalized good day and good afternoon. But we do say mayong buntag if it's like morning, early morning. So we emphasize the mornings, and then mayong gabi for evening. Yeah.
Man, I wish I speak more dialect, Filipino dialect.
I encourage my friends who are Northerners. I encourage them to learn at least one other Filipino language, because I think it bridges the gap between the many cultures and traditions and languages in our country, because we're so unique and diverse. And I think just speaking another language really helps. So my mother actually spoke. I think she spoke 3 or 4. She knew Ilocano, Hiligaynon, and then of course Bisaya, and then she knew generalized Tagalog. But because she was married to somebody from Laguna, so my ex stepfather, she also knew the colloquialisms of the San Pableños in Laguna. So she was really good at that, and people really loved her for that because they felt very seen, very embraced by her speaking all these languages. Like, she really tried. So yeah, go ahead. I mean, there's so many good online courses, free and not for free. So yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, I'm so envious. Like, Tagalogs are so lazy, man.
Yeah, because you're the default, man. Because
know,
everybody
it's
tells
like-
you you're the default.
That's what we like. That's it. Like, hey, we're the Tagalog, so you speaking to us. You know what I mean?
You're like the Americans. Like, you think everybody speaks Tagalog or everybody speaks
I
English.
hate it. Like, obviously, growing up, I was an idiot. Well, I'm still an idiot, but still, Like, I always like, oh, no, you're speaking to us because we know we're the Tagalog, Then, as I got older, I'm like, what an idiot. You could have spoken, Ilocano or Kapampangan. Or my dad is from Bicol. He could have taught me Bicol, But I'm like, nah, Tagalog.
No, it's never too late. I tell, like, I meet people who are like you. You obviously grew up there, and I meet people who are maybe half Filipino or who are full Filipino but have been born they grew up somewhere else and they've never been taught any languages. And I said, it's never too late. As long as you have air in your lungs and your heart is beating, you can still learn it. Like, people can still learn it. So yeah, don't regret it just yet. As long as you're alive, you can still do it.
Such a positive outlook. I love
No,
it.
it's true. Like, I never thought I'd be a podcaster and learn a little bit about, podcasting, let alone, small scale editing. I still need help with my own editing, but I can edit some of my other stuff. And here I am. I've got like a stupid new laptop and some software, and I suddenly understand, like, oh, now I also need to know how to edit videos, if I want to do like audiograms. Like, who knew that, in my late 30s I'd be still learning new skills. So yeah, when it comes to learning, I'm a very positive person. When it comes to other things, okay, you can ask me later.
That's funny. Since you mentioned your podcast, why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation where they can reach you or whatever you want to promote?
Yes, of course. So I host two podcasts. One is Lagim, a Filipino true crime podcast. And as the name implies, it's all about true crime and cases from the Philippines. I am on my third season, so I think we're past half now. We're sort of mid-season now, so I'm at episode 9 next week, and I release every other Friday. If I'm lazy, sometimes I do it on a Thursday and just sleep in on a Friday. So major podcasting platforms, they all have my podcast: Apple Podcasts, Google. I think I'm on Amazon Music even right now. I think I submitted my podcast to them, and Spotify. I've got an Instagram account and other social media accounts where people can reach me. So it's just at Lagim Podcast. My other podcast is Asia in the Shadows. So as the name implies as well, it's all about true crime, and that's sort of more generalized Asian true crime cases. I release every week on a Wednesday, and that's more of a it's not too deep divey like Lagim, but still very interesting cases, some very horrible ones. I can't help it. Looking at you, Japan, I don't know what you're doing in there, but you have really interesting cases. But yeah, so I try to cover as many countries as I can, as a result of my research. But it's been a running joke now among some of my followers that there's always going to be a case from Japan in each season because they just have too many interesting cases. So if you are a fan of true crime, definitely listen. If you're not a fan yet, then do give it a go. Do give it a try. I'd love to think that my podcasts are not sensationalist in nature, so it's not offensive to the victims. I always try to be very careful and empathetic and respectful. So I hope that if that is something that appeals to your listeners, then yeah, give it a go. And I'm also on Instagram, so it's at AITS Pod for Asia in the Shadows.
I have to be honest. Your podcast, I love and hate it. Love. Love.
I get that a lot.
It's so well done. I mean, it's so journalistic. You try your best to really do the research, but I hate it because, again, it's crimes and people, unfortunately, there's so much stuff there. But I want to talk to you about Lagim later. I want to focus on Christine.
Okay.
And I know that you were born in Germany. Do you remember living in Germany?
Yes, I do. I spent I think the first almost 6 years of my life in Germany, before my parents decided to split up, and my mom took me back to Davao, and I think I turned 6 in Davao, if I remember correctly. So it would have been almost 6 years in Germany from birth till that time.
How did mom end up in Germany?
She ended up in Germany. Oh my God. Like the version she told me when I was younger was that she was working at a publishing house in Davao. And this was sort of smack bang in the middle of martial law, and life was hard. And for somebody in Mindanao, it's even harder because you're basically not really paid attention to, being so far away from the capital. But she said she was doing well, but then she also got a bit disillusioned. And she felt like things were going to get worse. So she started, I think what she told me, she started joining sort of this pen pal agency thing, but I think it was a dating agency of sorts. And then
Mom.
she ended up having all these male pen pals from all over the place, and two guys stuck out, one from Aussie, so from Australia. And she had a picture back when I was a child. She held on to that picture, which I now retrospectively I'm thinking that was weird, Mom. Come on. And the other one was my dad. And I was like, oh my God, Dad was already balding at like 50 or 40, So they wrote back and forth. And wouldn't you know, my mom, the adventurer that she was, she said, fuck it. I'm just going to say yes to one of these guys. And I just want to get out of this country because, it's hard and it's becoming dangerous. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my next episode at Lagim. So, listen to that.
Can't wait.
Because there's a tidbit there that's going to be interesting and vital to the next case. I'm not going to say anything now. So yeah, and then in 1983 towards 1984, she landed in Germany with the sole purpose of marrying my dad, becoming a mom, and working as a midwife because she was a qualified midwife in Davao for some time after that. And then by 1984, there I was, the daughter that she wanted, apparently. And that's how she landed there. She was I think I would say she was amongst the second or third waves of medical professionals from the Philippines that were admitted to Germany because there was a nursing and midwife sort of shortage back then in Germany. But that she ended up actually leaving the medical profession because she hated it and she wanted to be a businesswoman, Negosyante ang pangingisip.
Man, the balls of that woman, eh?
Yeah, I mean, she's always been like that. I think I got it from more like the sense of adventure, like she just dives into it, like, yeah, whatever, But she's never really done it sort of in a selfish way. She knew that when she gets to Germany, she'll be able to get a better job and support my lolo and lola, in a better way, and her younger siblings, because she was number six of 13 kids.
But why her? Why did she put that burden on herself to be the breadwinner?
I don't know. I mean, she was not the only one, earning the money. Like my grandparents were still very much, the farmers that they've always been. And, at some point life did get better, even for, those who were farmers. And then sort of the first 5 kids were also on the farm or doing, whatever they were good at doing. But she was the one who's always wanted out of the province, out of Davao. When she was out of the province, she wanted to go to Davao City. When she was in Davao City, she wanted to go somewhere else. And that's how she landed in Germany. She always looked for greener pastures, I suppose. And she always knew that she could do better. And she was so comfortable getting out of the comfort zone, and that's always been her sort of her personality. But yeah, she always had a great sense of responsibility. I don't think anybody really put it on her, but she felt like she had to do it. Yeah.
And then after going to different places, she decided, you know what, I'm going back home.
Yeah, I think for her it's I think she said, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve, and she realized that life abroad has its good sides, the money is good, social security, medical insurance, those kind of things. But then she had her fair share of racism, against her. There were a lot of cultural differences that could not be reconciled in the end. She suffered a lot during winter times because she had some joint issues. So, yeah. And I guess she didn't really want to coexist with my father at that point, they eventually became friends, but she didn't want to coexist in the same country, even in the same city. So she thought the best thing to do is to take whatever money she had and invest it in the Philippines because it would be of bigger value anyway. And that's how she said, yeah, I'm just going to go back and see what life has in store for me back in Davao, which I suppose was a good move because Davao was then up and coming at that point. Like the skirmishes of the 80s and 70s were sort of like fading away, and we were heading to sort of a better direction, and people were investing in Davao again. I remember the Japanese were putting a lot of money at that point, and people were scrambling to like be in business with them or sort of adjacent to them. And my mother really wanted a slice of that cake as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. How about little Christine? How was her life in Davao?
Oh yeah. There were bad times, but there were hard times at the beginning because beginning somewhere else from, if you've moved from anywhere else will always be a bit difficult.
How was your school life?
Oh gosh. Well, I stood out. I stood out like the whole way through, and I kind of hated it. I hated that I stood out. I didn't like the extra attention,
Why?
but I just didn't like the extra attention. Like, sure, you can appreciate sort of like I always told my mom like I appreciated when I'm complimented for like doing good, like being intelligent, being smart. But then when I'm picked out because you're tall, your hair is not black, and
You're
I'm
fair skinned.
yeah, my fair skin and all that. And then at the beginning there was a lot of bullying in grade school because that's just very typical. And in high school, if people high school is already tough as it is, and if you stand out, I felt like back then you better stand out for all the right reasons that people will envy you for, because if it's the opposite, ang hirap ng buhay. People will make it really hard on, for you the whole 4 years. But then what I did was I was very active in school government. I really tried to be like the overachieving leader so that I can be untouchable and I become like sort of an authority figure, like have a little bit of power. And I think that repelled a lot of the bullies towards like second year, 3rd year, 4th year high school. And I really did well with contests. Like there's an art contest, like, yeah, me, I'll do it. There's a poetry contest, me, I'll do it, because I thought that the more I got credit for being the smart leadership type of person, the more I'm protected from the bullies. And it worked. It actually worked in the last 3 years of high school because I couldn't be the popular girl, like I was not, the beauty standard back then for Ateneo High School back then. It's always like the petite, small dancer, cheerleader type back in my high school. So like, oh yeah, I can't do that. I cannot be the belting singer from the Glee Club, right? I cannot be the overly flexible dancing queen. So I said, you got to do something. You got to do a combination. So you got to be smart. You got to be a leader. You got to be student government. So yeah, medyo ganun yung peg ko. There's some people who hated me for it because they thought I was really bossy. But I'm like, well, this is just going to be my personality until I survive high school. But yeah, that's how I survived high school back then. Yeah, it was weird, but I did enjoy parts of it as well.
What do they bully you for?
Because first of all, I stood out because of my height and my appearance. I'm plus size. They made fun of the German thing, so they would do a lot of Nazi and Hitler things that I did not know about. So they would do stuff. I'm just like, you don't know anything about Nazism or Hitler, right? And you're just like saying things that you might have read on the internet. The internet was in its infancy. Like it was a primordial soup of what the fuck everywhere on the internet. And they would just make weird jokes that they did not themselves like understand. But of course I understood because I knew that's part of my heritage. And then what else did they bully me for? In grade school, it was, I loved dancing, but I don't think I was really good at it. But I kept doing it until one person came up to me and said, there's a whole group of boys who are like talking about you because your dancing is so crap. And I'm like, is it really? Like I didn't even realize, Because I was such in my element, like, oh my God, I'm such a dancing queen. And then that's when I realized, okay, no, you're not a dancing queen. Take it down a peg. Um, yeah, so that was those were the common things, that you learn because you really need to survive.
Mm.
School kids, being a school kid yourself. So those were the kind of things that I usually got bullied for, but that all kind of went away, I guess, after second, third year or fourth, when I applied my method of being the slightly bossy leadershiply person. Because you just need to survive. You need to find your niche in high school and survive, like for
Hmm.
those 4 years. Yeah, such a weird cosmos, really.
Yeah, high school is such a weird thing. I was more of a in the middle of nerd and jock at the same time.
Oh wow, okay, that's a
Yeah.
combination.
Yeah, because I have a group of guys that I hang out with, the nerds, very simple, which I like, we don't do nothing silly, just very basic, study, whatever. And then I have friends, because I love basketball and I'm pretty okay with it. So I hang out with the jocks.
Right, okay.
But I don't like the jocks because they're jocks.
They're jokes.
They like the girls, they like flashy things. And I was poor. I
Yes.
didn't have money. They had money, they have new shoes, they have the new Jordans, they have the new whatever. I'm
Everything,
like,
yeah.
I don't have nothing,
Nah, yeah.
So it was kind of hard to go with them. And I just didn't like the drama of like, girls and the politics of it.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's always something about the girls going on because the hormones are insane. But with the guys, it's the same. At least in my high school, there was always something like, yeah, that week, XY were together, and then X broke up with Y, and X is now with another one. There was always like a soap opera going on.
Mm,
And I just remember if you just make friends with the right people as well, not really, you don't have to be close, you don't have to sacrifice your principles, but if people know that you are sort of acquainted with them, then that gives you a bit of street cred. And
mm,
I remember I went to a church because my mom, I'm basically a church kid, grew up in the church as well. Never really liked it, but never told my mom when she was still alive because it would have broken her heart. But in that church, there were a lot of like big names, both in Davao celebrity show business, because we've got Ang TV, and our own ABS noontime show that is ABS.
mm,
So, and there were people from that area in there, and there were some politicians as well, and their kids in there. And when they saw me, and I would go sometimes for like the midweek, I don't know, evening Bible session, whatever, and they would see me, I'll be in my uniform, and they recognize me, and they say, "Hey, you go to Ateneo?" Like, yeah, like, "Oh, I know you." Yeah. So then I made friends with them in church, and then we're back in campus. We'd say hi, hello, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, you know him?" And he was like one guy. Oh my God, I hope he doesn't listen to this because I think he lives in Canada. There is one guy, he was the son of a counselor. Sa Davao, and really one of the good-looking, intelligent, tisoy, guapo, everything. Like everybody loved him, right?
mm.
And then this one time, I remember because I didn't know he went to the same church, but then we made friends in church. I said hi to him at the corridor, sa quadrangle namin or sa corridor somewhere, sa high school, and everybody was just like, "Oh my God, Christine knows him." And then suddenly you could feel like there's a new respect earned.
Mm.
And that's how you build your street cred in high school. It was so silly. And I remember like looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even like the guy that much, like I just felt like I had to like have that rapport with him.
Mm.
But you need to do what you need to do to survive. But yeah, that's high
Yeah,
school.
it's just so annoying, like
So
looking back now.
ridiculous.
I'm
So
like, why? Like I said, with me was like, since I hang out with the jocks, I go to the
yeah.
cool parties.
Oh, see.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
My
So
mom would never allow me.
so that's the thing I like. But the funny thing is, sometimes my cousins will be like talking to whatever friend of or acquaintance, and like, "Oh, do you know this group of guys?" Like, yeah, those are my brother, my cousin's friends. And like, who's your cousin? And they'll say my name, and they're like, "I don't know him," which I love because I can hang out with them, and I
Yeah.
don't have the drama that comes with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
You
know?
were towing the line there. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all about strategies. You got to have your tactics.
exactly. Did you date anyone in high school?
Oh, here's the thing. My mom was so strict. Um, I kind of quasi dated somebody from church though,
Mm.
and then I had a manliligaw back in our subdivision, but my mom had spies. I swear to God, she had spies. Because I remember in first year, after the sports day activity, we would have that sort of in the first couple of weeks after school starts. I cut classes. I cut classes. I went to the mall with a few friends,
Mm.
and I'm just like, let's go to this smaller mall para di tayo mabisto, para di tayo mahuli. So then we were there, we're eating our food, and I kept looking over my shoulder. I swear to God, my mom will be here any minute. She can't be. She can't because I knew she was somewhere in a business meeting somewhere in the south of the city, and my school is sort of in the sort of western side of the city. So it can't be. Just can't be unless she's a superhero and she can't be projecting herself somewhere else. It can't be. But little did I know, one of the one of the cashiers at the food court knew her, but I didn't know her, right? So I was there enjoying my life, cutting classes, giggling with my girls, went back to school, got picked up, didn't say anything for like 2 weeks. And she said, "Oh, anak, don't you want to eat merienda with me?" Sure, on a Sunday. Very, very, very chillax. My mom knew how to do this so good.
Mm.
And she said, "So, how was, the 2 Saturdays ago, how was that food that you ate at this food court at this time on that day?" I'm like, what? And then I just remember my face, like I felt it flushed and I was red and I felt like sweaty, my palms, and I'm just like, Mom, I'm so sorry. How did you know about that? Well, I have my spies everywhere in the city. I'm like, what? After that, I never cut classes again. I swear. I never cut classes after that. I was, yeah, never ever again. So I didn't date essentially, but I had, yung mga almost lagi, it's like yung mga
Mm.
patago, like you always
Mm.
have to hide things. I had a couple of those, but I was so scared of my mom that she would find out, that maybe a teacher would see us and that teacher would run to my mom. Like, yeah,
Mm.
everything was possible at that point, Basically, she worked at the CIA. That's what I thought back then.
Did she hit you?
um, yeah, I mean, palo, yung typical na palo,
Yeah, nothing
You know what
crazy.
I mean? Like you get a chinela somewhere on your butt when you're doing something
Mhm.
bad. So I got that. It I think back then it was so glamorized and it was so accepted that if we knew what we know now about hitting children and trauma and all that, that would not have been a thing back then. But back then, um, kinukumpara namin yung sarili namin sa isa't isa, kami mga magkakaibigan. Oh yeah, because my mom totally used a belt on me last night. You're like, oh, I'm gonna one up you. Ginamit niya yung hanger,
Mm.
That
Mm.
was this conversations back then, and it's horrifying to look back, but that was our reality. At least that was sort of me and my cousins and my friends' reality. Like our parents hit us with the chinelas, or when medyo, yung ginaganon sa tenga,
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was our reality. That was a part of our childhood. Yeah.
I like that. I think you're the few people that talks to other people or friends about being hit. I never
Yeah.
talk to nobody.
Really?
No, it's like you get
Oh.
hit, you quiet.
Oh.
You don't
No,
say
but
anything.
but I remember talking to people who are my age. Like we would never talk to like somebody who's older,
No, same.
to tattletale. It was just sharing like, oh my God, like last night was really bad, and this and that happened. And we never and the thing is, I think we thought it was so funny, and we thought that we were so much better than the spoiled younger generation, because we always think that the younger generation is like crappier and more spoiled. And
Mm.
yeah, I remember me and my cousins, we would tell sort of the younger cousins, "Oh, you have it so well. Hindi kayo pinapalo sa puwet ng tsinelas. Back then when we were younger, we were so well disciplined." That was a
Mm.
conversation back then. But in that context, we thought it was funny and invalid. But I don't think the conversation was ever, "Oh my God, I feel so traumatized about being hit." Back then it was just part of your childhood, and it was even funny. Like I think the funny was more of a self self-preservation mechanism. But yeah, that was, I think, the few people that were in my circle were quite comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, we didn't. We just it's like more of shame.
Yeah.
If you get
All
hit,
right.
it's more of shame. Like,
Yeah.
okay, be
Yeah.
quiet. You mess up. You don't do nothing. You don't say anything.
So
We
even with
don't.
friends, like school
We
friends?
don't. We don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We just know like, oh, shit went down yesterday. That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh my.
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's more for pride, I guess.
Pwede. Yeah. Yeah. It can be. I guess if you don't trust really, I think for me it was trust. Like I knew we had the same backgrounds. I knew our parents had the same temperament and the same type of, the discipline, um, the disciplinarian type of parents. So we felt comfortable because I think we empathized with each other, that we're having the same upbringing at the moment, and we can share that, and it's funny. But I think maybe I can only um hypothesize now that maybe the bigger fights, the bigger hittings, maybe those were the ones na hindi in shinare. Those are the ones that didn't get talked about a lot, because they're hittings and then they're hittings, right?
Oh, we
They're
got
ones
hit.
hit, and then you've got like, oh, yung medyo palo-palo lang ganon.
Yeah.
And maybe those are the ones that we didn't talk about. But back then we were quite open about, oh, pinalo yung puwet ko, or yung um a ruler. I was hit by a ruler on my hands or something. So those sort of conversations back then. But amongst cousin, I think we were a bit more candid, but also maybe not to that extent. But yeah.
Talking about trauma, do you feel traumatized now, or you understand it more?
I've only really unpacked this in the last couple of years, and I've definitely talked to a former therapist about it. And I think there is trauma from the hittings, the bigger ones, because there's a lot of, like you said, there's also shame. But back then, you don't realize that it was shame. There's a lot of guilt and also self-blame. And really, what my therapist said about it, and what I would gather from other friends who have now learned to unpack that and talk about it, and other friends who are from the Asian culture, because I've got a friend from India, the Maldives, Pakistan, and we sort of have the same vibe when it comes to, like, children being disciplined. And we talked about it, and apparently we always felt like, yeah, we've done something wrong, and then my therapist, sort of said the same thing about, well, whatever it is that you've done something wrong, you're a child, you're doing child things. You couldn't know better. Your brains were not even developed to its fullest potential. So you should never have been hit, in the first place, because you were childish, because you were a child, you were acting accordingly, you were acting your age. And there was absolutely no reason to feel guilt, shame, self-blame, to feel like you did something wrong. And it is more of a reflection on your parents. And all of us were kind of like coming together, like now in our late 30s, and just like, oh shit, now we need to unpack this. Now we need to like question if this has informed some of our decisions as young adults and now older adults, heading into our 40s. And that's still going on. Like, I have a friend that I talk to regularly, and we share what we talk about in therapy, and it's mind-blowing. Like, what our culture and what our upbringing and what our parents did or say or did not do or did not say had all an impact on how we are now as adults. And it's mind-blowing. Like, we've only scratched the surface. Like, millennials are, yeah, a bit fucked up, but we're working on it,
We're good.
essentially.
We're good. I don't.
We're working on it.
For myself, I didn't get mad that I got hit. Yeah, there are some times that like, come on, man, I didn't deserve that one.
Yeah.
There's some that like, yeah, I kind of deserve that one.
But even then, according to, like, what now about like mental health and all that, even then you were just acting like a child. Sure, you might have been like a really stupid
trust me, if you knew me when I
child.
was young, there's like, yeah, that one you deserve.
Okay. Yeah, but I firmly believe that, if you're 16 and you've done something stupid and, you're 16, what the
Yeah.
hell,
You're dumb. It
you're
is.
dumb. You really don't know anything.
Mm,
But like I said, there's so much to learn and unlearn. And
mm,
I hope that at least for our generation, that we can be open about either talking about it or open for putting ourselves to therapy, because it does help a lot talking about it.
mm.
I was quite resistant at the beginning, but then I was offered sort of like, yeah, do this 8-week thing. Let's see where you get. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is actually quite good. There's a
Mm.
lot of crying, um, but it helps. It helps. Kasi hindi pinag-uusapan sa kultura natin eh. So in the
No.
Philippines, it's still very stigmatized. I find it with male friends, male Filipino friends, male cousins. There's still a very sort of macho perspective on it. Like rub some dirt on it, and you're gonna be fine.
Mhm.
Like lalaki ka. You can't be feeling this way. You can't be feeling anything. Like no,
Mhm.
that's not
Push
how we
those
do it.
feelings down.
Yeah, push it all down, like swallow everything. But like that's how our uncles and our fathers and our grandfathers all ended up the way they did, with a lot of alcoholism as well and drug abuse, right? Like every day sa kanto nagiinuman. That's all trauma, man.
Mm.
So yeah, we're all just beginning to see all of that. So I have hope maybe for the younger generations that they would not sort of grow up like that. They would not have to deal with that kind of trauma moving forward.
Mm.
But let's see, they've got a pandemic and World War III to deal with later on
Yeah,
in
they
their
have their own
trauma.
stuff, you know? Like with my
Yeah.
kids, I tell them about my experiences that I got hit, this and that. I don't hit my kids, obviously. Not that because I'm on the podcast, but I really don't, because I know
Yeah.
how, painful it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sucked. I remember this one story that I know I didn't deserve the hitting,
Mhm.
right? So I was with my cousins, and those video games, like arcade games in like
Yeah.
someone's house.
Yeah.
So we're there. It was like in apartment buildings, and there was one child there that he had a cross eye.
Mm-hmm.
So they used to make fun of him, and
Mm-hmm.
that day they were make fun of him. Me, I was hanging out with my cousin. I wasn't saying anything to this kid because I feel like that's not cool to say, right? And then the kid went to the mom, and the mom went out of the house. We started running.
Oh
I ran
my.
because I felt like I'm in this group. I'm gonna get in trouble too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I ran away and go around the corner. Not little did I know that the lady went to our house,
Oh
and my cousin was our neighbor, right? I came home, dude. No talking. It's just pa 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 pa.
no. See?
And I started like while I was getting hit, I was kept on saying like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Like you can tell, you can talk to her. You can talk to her.
Yeah.
So I got hit. It was my aunt who hit me because she's the one who raised me. And then the lady came back because she wants to talk to the family and whatnot, whatever. If they're gonna press charges in barangay or whatever. And the lady was there, and I went up to the lady. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And the lady says, "Yeah, he didn't do anything." And I look at my
Oh.
aunt and like, say sorry, something.
Yeah. But they won't. No, they won't. The one thing that parents in that generation that did not do was apologize. They never apologized ever. Like
Nope.
even later in my before mom died, like a couple years before she died, and we came. I mean, we've always been close, but at some point when you are an adult, your relationship also changes, and it's more like a companionship
Yeah.
friendship type of thing going on. And even then, we never talk about those moments. We never talk about those, maybe the unfair type of beatings, or the very horrible ones, even the petty ones, the funny ones that I said I would share with other people. We never talked about those. It's like it never happened. And the thing that some of the people in that generation would say was that, well, you turned out fine because of what your mom did to you.
Yes.
You turned out fine. Look at you. You're becoming a lawyer. Look at you. You didn't get pregnant at 16. Look at you. You didn't become an alcoholic or a drug user. I'm like, yeah, but I don't think it's owed to that. It's me, because I don't want to, because I know what I want in life. Yeah, but you have to give credit to your mom because she disciplined you, because she hit you. You know?
I could have gone without the hitting, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah.
You know
I
when
think
back home when they say like they hit you like because I love you.
Yes. No, that's abuse, man. That's no, 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 no. We need to really get rid of that notion. That is so dangerous
And then
because
we always say like, well, can you love me less?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's how you end up with, for example, a generation of women who would take all the hitting and emotional abuse from husbands further down the line because they were told that hitting is loving. And
Yeah.
it's not, and that's how a lot of my aunties, a lot of my cousins, female cousins, had stayed in a very, very toxic, abusive relationships because, yeah, apparently it's fine. And then,
Yeah.
it gets ingrained in your mind
Mhm.
that, no, it's all good. Hitting is good.
Yeah,
Hitting is loving.
and then you add the Catholic thing that like
Yes.
divorce.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. The culture plus the religion. There's no there is no boundary between those two. It's very enmeshed. Even though I would always argue that our Filipino culture, um, pre-Catholicism, pre-colonization, is very very different from how it looks now.
Mhm.
Of course, with religion in play, but yeah, and then I start with that, and everybody just leaves the table, essentially. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you're the cook. Like, look at this talking about the
Ito na
diwatas and
naman.
everything. Crazy
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if they're not ready to listen to that, then maybe the younger generation will. And I think there's hope there for the younger ones. The way that I listen to my younger cousins,
Mm.
they're a bit more receptive to those kind of ideas, and I'm very very proud of them for that.
Yeah, me too. They're kinder.
They're kinder, yeah,
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 they have
and so
more.
much smarter, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, yo. I mean, I'm proud of them, but still, like,
Yeah.
I want to be smart too.
You are,
So,
but you're your generation smart. We're our generation smart. We know what we know from what we've been taught and what we learned. And we can learn from them. We can learn a lot from them. Yeah.
yeah, who was that? A former guest of mine, Gelare Darabi. She's a journalist for Al Jazeera and whatever else. She mentioned that our generation is the healing generation.
Mm.
We're the one who's gonna heal all the trauma that we went through. We're gonna heal, and then hopefully we pass on that healing to the next
Yeah.
generation, and they're
Yeah.
the ones who's gonna continue.
Yeah. So we're the ones breaking the cycle. You know,
Trying, girl, trying
trying. Yeah. Well, I'm
hard.
here. I'm gonna be the fun auntie. I don't think I'm gonna end up being a mother, but I'm the fun auntie and godmother, and I'm gonna help with the breaking of the cycle. And that's why I talk to, my friends, those who have kids, about breaking that cycle as well, because that's important moving forward.
So then you decide to move back to Germany.
Yes. So I originally wanted to stay in Davao for college, but I think my mom really pushed me to explore and embrace, I guess, the German side of things. And I protested heavily in the year leading up to my departure, because I didn't really have much of a relationship with my dad, and I know that he got remarried as well, and that even before meeting me, my madrasta over there, my his wife back then and already ex-wife some years later, already hated me even before meeting me. So that as a teenager, when you're told that kind of information, you're hesitant, right? Like, you don't you the whole point of being a teenager is you want to be accepted. And if you already know that this whole adult is already hating you even before you arrive there, it already gives you some thoughts really about maybe not going. But my mom was like, no, go there, definitely go to law school, make friends, have a relationship with your father and all that. So I did after high school. I think a couple of months after I graduated, I went on my own. So by August 20, no, 19, I don't even know anymore, it feels like forever, but yeah, I was there after my high school graduation. And yeah, started to learn about my German heritage, which was a cultural shock, to say the least.
Let's talk about that.
What do you want to know?
Tell us whatever you want to tell us.
um First of all, the weather. That was a culture shock. I didn't even know that there were like four seasons. I'm like, what? I know I've read about it somewhere, but it was really four seasons. And then I had to basically start from zero with my father, sort of having a relationship with him. We were basically strangers. And then I had to deal with the language as well. I forgot most of my German, so I had to relearn, and I had to go to this special school, and it was sort of intense German language learning from morning till afternoon, 4 days a week, until I was fluent enough to go to high school there, sort of senior high school. So yeah, that was one thing. And then I needed to learn about sort of the German attitude, the German mentality. They are very direct, they're very frank. And I like the fact that they're all very efficient. So that stereotype is definitely true. And I like that they're always on time, they're very efficient. But I couldn't understand the whole being direct, yung hindi paligoy-ligoy, that kind of thing. Because we Filipinos, we kind of like to dance around things, beat around the bush sometimes, not trying to hurt feelings. But with the Germans, they can definitely sort of, they can tell you things in a direct manner, and that it's not a personal attack. It's just them being professional, telling you, for example, at work, your work was not good enough, you need to redo it. And if you do not understand that's just how the Germans are, then you can get hurt easily. But if you know that it's just a professional opinion, and you could still both have a beer later after hours, then that's difficult. So I needed to learn that. I cried a lot, I think, in the first 2 years, like buckets and buckets and buckets of tears, because my dad was very German. The school that I went to was very German in the end, the senior high school that I went to. It was an all-girls school. It was very Catholic. And then all these German girls, like, just being their German selves. And I could not be on the same wavelength. And then I really had to learn. It took me around 2 years, I think, to truly understand how they are as a people and how different I am to them, that I cannot fully identify as German. Like, I know I always say that I'm both, and I'm both German and Filipino, but I've never quite fully identified as German, because I feel very different when I'm amongst them. There are just too many differences, even though I look like this. But they themselves, when they look at me, they mistake me for something else. They don't even see me as German, which is quite funny. Like, the Filipinos will never mistake me for Filipino, and the Germans will never mistake me for German. So I'm somewhere in the middle, which is true. But yeah, that was sort of my German experience. And then after 2 years, I kind of got the hang of it, the language as well, the culture. I've made some German friends, which I'm pretty proud about, Yeah, and then I graduated from their high school, which is essentially grade 13. And after that, I was like, I kind of had enough of Germany. Let me go. Layas na naman, kind of.
Like mom.
Like mom. Like, let me go somewhere else. And then I kind of just went over the border to the Netherlands, because I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. But then I got bored there as well, and there were too many Germans for my taste. There were other Germans going to the same liberal arts college. I'm like, what is this? Like, I got away from Germany only to land in a city so close to the border, in this university that was quite nice, by the way. Everything was in English, but there's so many Germans. It felt like little Germany. I'm like, no. Yeah. So after that, I kind of escaped again, and then I landed back in Germany, and after that in England. So, and that's sort of the fast forward version of it, of how I landed in England eventually.
Why did you choose England?
First and foremost, the language. I just didn't want to deal with learning another language. And also, I didn't want to go back to Germany and go to law school there. And also, I've always been curious about England, especially because I was such a big Harry Potter fan in high school back in the Philippines, And I thought that everywhere in England would be like Harry Potter and Hogwarts, Obviously wrong, but I enjoyed sort of my first couple of years as a student here, because being a student here and being sort of an working adult are two different things, obviously. But being a student, you meet so many different people from so many different parts of the UK in general, and also the international students, that it felt almost like Hogwarts, like, oh, very, very diverse.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's sort of my experience, and I kind of liked it. I was very curious. I was on my own, literally. I didn't know anybody in England. I
Mm.
I landed in Liverpool, and I remember I've not viewed my room. I've just said, let me put down a deposit for this weird looking dorm room. It's small, it's cheap, and then I got there, didn't realize how small it was. It felt like a matchbox, because literally a bed and a small study table. That's all it was for like my whole first year. But yeah, I had a great time.
That's awesome. And that's where you became a lawyer?
Yeah, so well, becoming a lawyer in England is quite a journey. So after your 3 years of bachelor's, you have to do 2 years of sort of a on the job training, and then you can do, before that you have to do a post grad, or you can do it in those 2 years where you're doing an on the job training. And I had sort of a difficult time following that linear path of becoming a lawyer, because I graduated sort of just after the recession, the big world financial crisis,
Hmm.
and life was really tough. Like I couldn't get a job even as a like store assistant back then in Liverpool. It was tough. So I had to stop the whole lawyer thing after graduation. I went back to Germany again, did my master's, worked for a little bit, and then resumed my lawyer journey in 2015. And I qualified actually a few years later after that. But I've been working in the legal industry since 2015, 2016.
Mm. So why did you choose family lawyer?
I kind of fell through, I don't know, like I fell into it. When I did my on the job training, I worked for a local council, so local government.
Mm.
And that was one of the more busy and interesting areas that they worked in as their in-house legal department. And the cases that I've sat on were very interesting, very riveting to listen to, academically really, really good to immerse yourself in. And I thought, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. But I was still very unsure, even after I qualified. Then I started working in that, and yeah, I worked for the local government, which is usually the entity that would bring the case to court and would take the children away from parents if they are abusing or neglecting the children.
Mm.
And then as a newly qualified lawyer, after I properly had my certificate, I was registered as a qualified lawyer. I then went to the dark side, as they would say, and I represented the abusive and neglecting parents, which was quite a culture shock, but it was good training. Yeah. So yeah, that was sort of my trajectory. And then I kind of went back afterwards, after almost a year. I went back to the local government side because I thought, nah, I feel more comfortable representing the local government, than the parents, because I had some very interesting clients, and it was always a bit a roller coaster every day, to be meeting parents who were in that situation.
Uh, anyways, we have to talk about the pink elephant in the room,
Oh, okay.
the Philippine election.
Oh, yeah. Well, ask me questions and I shall answer.
Well, what do you think of the result?
Um, I think we saw it coming. I think a
Hmm.
lot of us were still hoping for like a U-turn, but I think we saw it coming. If we're being really, really realistic and honest with ourselves, we saw it coming. And I think it's been coming since 2015, 2016. Um, but we were, I think I can speak for a few people sort of in my age group and sort of in my um maybe the kind of people who are outside of the Philippines looking in, and I think we've always known that there was a possibility that a Marcos would gun for a high position, but we didn't allow ourselves to be pessimistic and um what's the other word? I can't think of the word now, but we didn't allow ourselves to even think that maybe he would gun for the highest position of the land. And I think that's the mistake of those who wanted to prevent him from getting to the top. We always thought, surely not. Surely not. No, you have to sometimes be very apocalyptic and worst case scenario thinking about these things, because stranger things have happened in other countries. And I think now people have finally learned their lesson, but it is too late, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
not really that late. Yeah, I think the liberal side of things, the anti-Marcos faction in the Philippines have grown really lazy and complacent after 1986, thinking that maybe the majority of Filipinos would never want to go back to that. But as I said in one of my Instagram stories a couple of days ago, there's always been this sleeper fraction within our Filipino society they've always been pro Marcos, and
Mm-hmm.
they've never changed their stance, and they've always been strong and united. And we thought they didn't exist, but they've always been there, and we who were anti, we we grew complacent. We just chillaxed too much, thinking nothing will happen. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you really think about it, when you really look into like early 90s, when Aini and Bong Bong started coming back in 92, 91, I don't know which years exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then Imelda started running for, I think, the governorship. And then somebody started somewhere else in Ilocos running for the governorship. That's sort of trickling in, all these
Mm-hmm.
smaller moves and steps already starting in the 90s, and by 2006, they've won a couple of court cases, or, some of the court cases from the states were not enforced. And we should have known back then that
Yeah.
something was brewing,
The,
but we were so good in thinking that, nah, maybe not.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was in shock. I
You
knew
were
it was gonna happen. Growing up, I was surrounded by pro Marcoses.
really,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was like old people that actually went through the martial law, and they're like, "Yeah, it was fine. It was safe. There was nothing happening." I'm like, "No, you're not allowed to leave, and people were dying. What are you
people were
talking
dying.
about?"
Yeah, yeah,
No, no, no. It was safe. It was safe. I'm like, all right, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what to. I don't know what to say. You
yeah.
can't. You can't really argue, right?
Yeah, and if you're younger, the older generation will always sort of like,
Yeah.
scold you
You weren't
for
there.
having a different opinion, or for having they thought the wrong opinion. But yeah, I think, yeah, if we had been more, I think if our parents, I think, had been more, that generation, I guess, had been more mindful about what was going on and not really view it as an impossibility, but would have taken sort of a worst case scenario view on things, maybe it could have been prevented. I don't know. I'd like to think so. Like, again, like I'd like to think positively about these things, but no, maybe at that time we should have been, no, we should never have allowed them back in. But then we allowed small, like, little by little, they were creeping back into society, into politics. And next thing they were also showbiz, because I think one of Aimee sons was a model or something. So he
Hmm.
was, that was also represented. And then a lot of sort of the distant Manotoks or Romualdeses, they were also doing their thing in their regions. So they were creeping in like little by little, like little cancer cells just building up,
Yeah.
metastasizing. I'm probably going to be getting in trouble for saying that. For saying all that, but
Hey, that's why I called you
yeah.
brave.
No, but people already know where I am. Like, I guess somebody told me you can't go back to Davao now. I'm like, no, let's see about that. But yeah, I think people just grew complacent, and also maybe we were tired. I think maybe that generation and then our generation was kind of like, we were the hangover generation of the Marcos era. So after 1986, when we thought everything was great and safe, we kind of just like chilled. That generation was tired, was hungover, and we were the ones who were like, oh, sure, I think it's okay now. So we had other things on our mind. We took
Mm.
care of other things. We tried to achieve other things than being super vigilant about a Marcos coming back in from Hawaii. You know what I mean? So yeah, we were that led to all this. And it's amazing to see that it only took 36 years. Like, that
Yes.
is I'm older than that,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
older than that. So yeah, it's sad. It's really sad, but I've I've said that, it might be too late, but we could still work on something to. I don't know. I don't know what's the goal now. I don't actually know what's the goal. Either what to oust him again, EDSA 3, to combat disinformation. I don't know what's the movement now. I need to know because I'd like to join, but I don't know. I think everybody is kind of grieving, and we're all still very fractured. So we don't
Yeah.
know
I
what do
don't
we want to
know.
achieve.
I like to think about. I like to stay positive. I'm. This is how I'm thinking. Okay.
Mm,
Hopefully, right now it's hard for him to, like, I don't know, like, cure the sins of his dad, because
mm.
Imelda still is there. She is
Yeah,
still the queen, right?
yeah, yeah.
So let's say I'm thinking, maybe if Imelda passes, maybe somehow she's like, you know what, those were wrong.
Mm,
Maybe I could make the country better in
mm.
my own way. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean because I told my other friend about this the other day that um he has the he has the chance now to either go down a very dark path like his dad or prove us all wrong. I'd like to be
Mm,
proven wrong. Like please
me
prove us
too.
all
Me
wrong,
too.
right? Like if he starts, but the thing is he needs to start with acknowledging what his dad did and
That's the
that he
problem.
was part of that machinery because he was not a an innocent child or teenager back then. He was a full grown man. He was governor of, I think, he was governor somewhere in the north
Yeah,
at
he
that
was
point.
30 plus years old.
Exactly. So you cannot convince me that you are not aware, you were not part of it. You were part of the machinery. So
Mhm.
you need to acknowledge what your dad did, what you did, what your family did, and then the healing can start. But then you also have to put your money where your mouth is by paying reparations. You
Mm.
have to pay reparations. You have to make sure that there's something out there. Your ill-gotten wealth will be pulled back in because you cannot pay reparations from the kaban ng bayan because that's our that's our money. You cannot give us our money back. Like what is this?
Yeah, yeah.
So it has to be from what you've stolen. You have to give that back and you have to pay reparations, or just something that would let people understand and know that you are taking accountability, because so far that's not happened. There's a clip that has surfaced on Twitter just today. He's in Australia, I think, still right now, right? So there's a Filipino Australian youth who, amongst the crowd of wanting to take a selfie with him and like singing his praises and screaming his name, this one tiny guy just comes up and says, "What are you going to do about the victims of martial law? Like my parents, my grandparents." He was talking really fast just to get his attention,
Mm.
and Bongbong just looks at him and says, "I don't know what you're talking about," and kind of just ignores him, starts taking all the selfies and walks away.
Mm.
Because that's been his stance for the
Yeah.
longest time. Like just ignore, ignore, ignore.
I like to think it, the way I think of it is like he has to please the pro Marcuses. And that's one way of doing it, right? He needs that vote. Also, he cannot say, yeah, that happened because Imelda is still alive.
Yeah. But the thing is, because he has the presidency, because he has the power to even to convert his pro Marcos faction to finally
Hmm.
acknowledge and accept that this has happened, because obviously the country is divided, and we know that this has happened. We know that people have died. We know people have been tortured. There's a whole wall of remembrance at the Bantayog ng mga Bayani, or Bantayog ng Bayan. I don't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
know it's in my next podcast. How can I forget? Um, it's very divisive. We're a divided nation because we know it happened. There are people that are still suffering from that, from the trauma of that dictatorship and all the atrocities that have been done, and to not acknowledge it and to not influence your followers to acknowledge that, will just continue the divide even after his presidency, because this will be a running topic for an eternity. It will
Yeah.
always come up because there's a new generation of Marcoses coming up. Sandro is now in Congress, or I don't know where he is, but he's elected somewhere. There's a Manotok somewhere in Ilocos also, one of Aimee sons, I think. He's won the election as well. There's a whole generation again of Manotoks and Marcoses who will gun for that higher position
Oh,
again
yeah.
for the next
They
generation.
will. They will.
And this
Definitely.
will come up over and over again. So somebody has to take the hit here. And this may one side to acknowledge that this has happened in history. I don't see any other way for this to play out.
I agree with you. Listen,
Yeah.
I could talk about this
Yeah.
for days.
For
Trust me.
days. Yeah.
But
Stress.
that's why we eat extra rice now.
Oh my goodness.
But we're getting there. But I want to talk to you about the Lagim podcast. In your
Yeah.
podcast. What was the inspiration to start the podcast?
Oh, I just love true crime, It's weird saying that, but it's probably not a love. Like it's a reverence that I feel for stories like that, because it's, for me, it's never just about the crime. It's never been about the gory part, the real sensationalist details. For me, it's the people behind it, the story of the victim, because that's a person, that's a whole person behind those stories, with a history, with loved ones, missing them. For me, it's also about the culture. When you listen to U.S. true crime stories, it tells you a lot about the American mentality. If you hear stories about Australia or Canada, it tells you a lot about Canada. It tells you a lot about Australia. And so for me, I've always wondered how it is with true crime stories in the Philippines. And that's how that's how Lagim got started, because I've asked myself that question, and I also saw that there was not a lot of representation there in the true crime genre when it comes to like Filipino content creators. But for me, I've always been curious about the question of good and evil. Are we inherently good? And is there a point in our lives where something can corrupt us and make us evil, or are we born evil and we're only contained and forced to be good because of laws and rules, customs and traditions? So that kind of like those kind of questions that I've been posing since I was younger. And that kind of got me on this, this bandwagon of liking true crime so much, because I've always been, I like the old CSI stuff, NCIS, Law and Order, and then at some point I jumped on the true crime bandwagon, and never looked back since.
How do you choose your subjects? Do you adhere to the listeners' wants, or you talk about what you want?
Half and half, because I've got my own personal list of interesting cases that I've always wanted to talk about, and my listeners have the advantage of being in the country. Most of them are, like, I think 80% of them are in the country, and the rest is sort of in the diaspora, and they would know more from current affairs, from news reports, that there's something going on. Maybe you could talk about this. So I rely on them for newer cases, but for sort of the legacy cases, the older ones, I have my own list of interesting ones that I really want to go through. A lot of them are 80s and 90s cases that I've grown up with, like the Maggie de la Riva, Visconde, and all that, Lipa massacre. So those are the ones that I've been exposed to day in, day out, and the movies from Carlo J. Caparaz,
Yeah. Remember those days, like in the 90s, they're like massacre every week.
Every time. And there's a rape case every day, a murder case every day. So that's like, no wonder I grew up liking crime fiction and true crime, because that's sort of like, we're just bombarded with images, and nothing was blurred, by the way. Nothing was censored.
It was like, oh, by the way, this guy cut their head. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, there's the head, by the way, it's just there, all bloody. So yeah, that's kind of how I grew up, and and I've always liked news. I've been like, TV Petro, I watch that shit. Magandang Gabi Bayan, yes, watching it. And then in Germany, would watch all like CNN and all the German stuff. Like, I've always been really like, I want to know what's happening, and then realized I really just kind of tuned in more for the crime stuff in the end. but yeah, that is how my crime journey started. And also, in the past, I like to read a lot of crime novels as well. I don't have a lot of time to read right now, but in the past, yeah.
Mm. How do you corroborate the information?
So I depend on the internet 100%.
Mm.
I look at different outlets, but I also like to look at academic journals
Mm.
because those are vetted and peer reviewed, right? So if they mention sources about a certain case, I would look up that. If I can find a Supreme Court document, I'd rely on that completely. So, for example, for the Maggie de la Riva case, I relied on the Supreme Court document for the narration of the agreed facts. If I don't have that, I'd have to put things together from different news outlets. Sometimes if I've got nothing, and I've had a few cases, I think the more obscure cases where almost nothing is reported about them, and I only have literally maybe a Reddit thread to go on,
Mm.
and maybe a blog post, maybe a short YouTube video, and I really have to scramble all the little information that I have, and I have to, like, when I record it, when I write the script, I always have to say allegedly, apparently, always put there a warning that I cannot confirm this, but this has been said by this thread. I think maybe this is what happened. I give my opinion, I give my assumption, but I'm not representing it as the facts of the case. So that's what I do when I can't find anything. But yeah, that's how I try to go on about it.
So if that's the case, do you worry that you might be replicating or spewing something that is not true and spreading it?
Always. I'm always in fear of maybe putting something out there that was not vetted, that was not confirmed. So I start with the for example, so with a case that is new, for example, like the Magwad siblings, it was everywhere because this literally only happened, a few months ago, back in December 2021. So you have Rappler, you have Inquirer, Philstar, you've got ABS-CBN and GMA News, the five big ones who always report on things, and then I kind of look at, are they saying the same thing? Are there little details that differ? And then you go into the more traditional sources like the Manila Bulletin, and then maybe you go into some of the YouTube videos from bigger news outlets. What is it there that kind of doesn't add up when you look at all of them together, and
Mm.
what are new information that you can glean from them? And that's how I know that these are the things that have been confirmed by people on the ground, and this one information that I can only find, for example, on Inquirer, I don't see that anywhere else. So maybe that's not confirmed. So I need to warn the listeners. I've only seen this in with one source. So please don't take this as the gospel truth. So that's how I kind of warn against possible misinformation.
Yeah, you're amazing, by the way. Every time I listen to your podcast, you're like, yo, I wish I'm good like that, you know?
Stop.
No, I'm serious. Like, man, you're so clear, so precise, and you're honest. Like you
Mm,
said, like if you say something that, oh, by the way, this is my opinion, that's
mm,
balls. Because some people will just say whatever.
yeah, and I live in fear of of people misunderstanding that, oh well, you said that and you represented that as a fact, and then when I really didn't want to, so I live in fear of that, and I think that keeps me in check, so that those are my checks and balances. And I think I've got my law degree to thank that for that, because when you are making an argument, you have to cite case law, you have to cite a legal principle that you're basing yourself on. If you're standing in front of the judge, and I remember standing in front of this was a district judge back when I was in a law firm representing a very problematic parent. And then I said, well, because of past evidence that this person has done this and this, and I think we got to give this mother a chance to take care of her baby. And I don't think it's right to be taking away the baby right now. And the judge just looked at me, and, it's very intimidating. If you don't have papers or social worker records to prove that, yes, this person has been a good mother in the past, and it's worth waiting for us to see how she takes care of this new baby. If you don't have that, you'll be talking out of your ass, and the judge will shut you down right away.
Mm.
But because I had that, I was very confident, and literally like three lawyers looking at me who are like in their 50s and 60s, and I'm just like shaking inside, like, God, I hope the argument stands, because I really need for this mother to show up for herself and take care of her baby. In the end, by the way, the baby was taken. I lost the case, but it's fine. Not my fault, because she messed up her life on her own. But I had to make that argument at the beginning because I needed for the court to see that based on past evidence, based on past recordings, she was a good person, she was a good mother, and I need them to give her a chance. And to be standing in front of a district judge with all these veteranong lawyers, I was like, God, I think I'm going to collapse right then and there. And I remember being so exhausted just from being so nervous that when I got home, I just slept. I just slept because I was so on adrenaline. And that's how I deal with cases as well at Lagim. If it doesn't sit comfortably with me that what I'm saying is confirmed, is something that I can represent as a fact, that I would be thinking about this for nights to come. And I have to, like, I don't know, warn the listeners, put something in the show notes, and just make sure that nobody misunderstands what I'm trying to say, because God knows, somebody from, I don't know, a pro Duterte or pro Marcos faction will pick it up and then, dox me for it.
You're done.
So I live in fear of that. So that keeps me in check. So it's fine. It causes me anxiety sometimes, but it's okay.
That's amazing. Listen, Christine, I really do appreciate you coming on. Dagang salamat.
Why sa payan, as we say in Visaya.
Why sa payan?
Yeah.
Before we close out, do you have any last remarks for the listeners?
Yes, well, I want to thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. And if listeners want to suggest cases, or if they're true crime fans, my DMs are always open. I always reply. And yeah, if there are any questions about Germany from your fans as well, or about England, they can also DM me. So I'd be happy to answer questions. So, but yeah, most of all, thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Oh, you're welcome, and have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again, Christine, for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.